Hello all and welcome back to the SRP Picks YouTube channel. Here as we discuss the upcoming 3M Open in Minnesota. We're coming off a difficult 2-week stretch for a lot of these players at the Workday Charity Open and Memorial Tournament, both at Murfield Village in Dublin, Ohio. And it was a really tough 2 weeks for these guys. As last week we saw the winning score only -9 for John Rahm, which had been coming off weeks where we had seen -20 winners. So the players got a little bit of a taste of reality in quote-unquote U.S. Open type conditions, according to CBS anchors over the weekend. And since we don't really get to experience any true majors for a little while longer, it was nice to see the guys compete on a tougher field and still be able to play very, very up-paced and very talented golf at that level. But they come to a course that's going to be much easier this week. The winning score at the 3M Open last year was -21 to Matthew Wolff, who we saw compete a couple weeks ago at the Rocket Mortgage Classic. So it's going to be a really interesting week. We got a lot of a weaker field. So the guys that you were able to get at lower prices and big name guys, for example, Sergio Garcia, only 7,700 last week. These guys all got price bumps. People who had been playing well or people who had big names coming into this tournament. But we still get Dustin Johnson. We still get Brooks Koepka. A lot of guys are coming back from the Memorial. So we're still going to have some big names in the field, but we're also going to have to target some guys lower that maybe you've never even heard of before that I've been doing research on. So you'll be able to fill out your DraftKings lineup, fill out your head-to-heads with all the data that you need to do so. Before we continue, please like and subscribe to the video and the channel. We'll be continuing doing work with the not the Memorial Tournament, golf, the 3M Open, and other tournaments that are coming up in the future. And we'll also be moving on to some MLB daily picks, along with NFL fantasy once those two sports come around. They've been a little slower than golf at being able to resume, but I know the MLB is coming back this Friday, and the NFL, despite the fact that some concerns about delaying preseason, they currently haven't considered pushing back the September start date. So I'm going to plan on getting out a lot of information on that over the next few weeks. So please continue to like and subscribe here. Check out the Twitter page, which is linked down below. The website's also linked down below. Any of the tools and techniques that I use on the video today, you'll be able to check out and use for yourself there. So please continue to use all that stuff. This is all for you so that you can make great picks for the upcoming weeks. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and let's get into the 3M Open. So we go back to the SRP Picks Twitter page here to look at the picks that we had last week and maybe make a few adjustments based on that analysis. So after a pretty poor week at the Workday Charity Open, we bounced back last week with some pretty good plays. In particular, DraftKings turned out really well for us, and we'll talk about our DraftKings performances a little bit later. But we'll start with the final plays for the Memorial Tournament that I had. So these were non-matchup plays. I believe matchup plays are down here. The matchup plays did not go as well as I thought. Sabatini versus Mickelson. Both of these guys didn't play great coming into the weekend. Sabatini obviously missed the cut. Mickelson made the cut but didn't shoot very well on the weekend as we expected. Both of them flirted with the cut line all week. Sabatini just didn't play as well with the irons that I thought he was going to. He was able to scramble, especially on day one, just as I initially anticipated. But Phil Mickelson continued with that game that I can't believe is still working for him, which is just the hit a lot of greens and hit a lot of long putts kind of strategy. He still missed a lot of small putts that I expected, and he didn't really have a great week overall. So I picked on the right guy. Unfortunately, the matchup against Sabatini proved to be in his favor, so that one hurt. Joaquin Niemann was the most frustrating player for me this week, and he reappears again in my DraftKings lineup as well, but he gained over 1.5 strokes on approach in each of the first 2 rounds and lost over 3 strokes putting, so he ended up missing the cut right on the number at +4. That was really frustrating to me. Obviously, when you have a guy who's ball striking so well, it's really disappointing to see him miss 5 to 6 foot birdie putts and par putts during the week. So we're going to have to hope that he's able to bounce back in the future. But even if he had shot well with the putter, it would have been tough to catch up to Matthew Fitzpatrick, who's -4 on Sunday, vaulted him up into the top 5 at the Memorial Tournament, which was unexpected for a guy who had really not been playing well with his irons coming into the week. His irons basically plateaued, but his scrambling around the very difficult workday and then Memorial greens, we saw him playing back-to-back weeks, were really, really impressive. Finau over Spieth obviously turned out really well, even though they threatened to give it back on Sunday when Spieth shot a +3 and Finau shot a +6. But Tony was up there contending throughout the week, ended up finishing in 8th due to a poor Sunday, as he does. He normally falls down on Sundays, but great job. Much better with the irons than we've seen in recent weeks, which was one of my concerns coming in. But I'm always going to pick against Jordan Spieth when they put him up against the class of player that Tony Finau is. And then Hideki over Brooks obviously did not go well. Brooks did not play well at all, especially on the weekend. But Hideki, it always seems like when I pick on Hideki, he always seems to have a bad week. His irons were horrible, especially relative to what he normally does. And while he tried to scramble at the beginning of the week, it kind of just fell off with more and more opportunities falling by the wayside. So the ball striking just wasn't there for a guy who really relies on that part of his game, and that really hurt. So 1-3 in matchups, not great. Final place for Memorial also didn't turn out great either. None of the top 31, 33, 41 with Berger, Answer, Casey hit. Casey and Berger most missed the cut on the number at +4. Berger double bogeying the final hole that eventually would keep him out. Casey bogeying his second to last hole that would keep him out as well. So we just missed the line on a couple of those guys who I feel could have played better on the weekend where ball striking was at a premium. Then Cantlay obviously didn't win, threatened at times during the week. Both him and Rory both had runs during the week when I thought that maybe they were going to get into contention, but they continued to fall back due to balls in the water, double bogeys, poor scrambling opportunities. Both of these guys showed a real ability to score, and I'm really looking forward to playing them later in the season as well, but just not this week. My closest hit from this range, honestly, was one of the ones I was probably the most scared about, which was Christian Bezenhout, top 20. He ended up posting an even on Sunday after a +6 on Saturday in much more difficult conditions, and saw that even drop from him being tied for 38th when he left the course to being tied for 22nd by the time the tournament was over due to the poor play of everyone around him. So he almost snuck into that top 20. Unfortunately, he did not. I really liked the way he played. Really good with the irons, really good with the putter as expected. The off-the-tee game was obviously horrible, again, as anticipated, but it didn't come back to hurt him as much as I expected last week. So I was happy with the Bezenhout play. Fell just outside, but I feel like we were on the right side with that one. DraftKings lineups were much more profitable. Lineup A was projected 62.5% of you said lineup A would beat lineup B, and that was actually incorrect. Lineup B was the big one last week. Again, 5 of 6 because Neiman, just had a horrible week on the greens. But my two budget plays of Carlos Ortiz and Harris English were dead on. Carlos Ortiz obviously finishing up with a pretty rough Sunday, but coming into that Sunday was tied for 20th at even. And his irons weren't great last week as seen. His ball striking in general wasn't really good, but his putter was hot. His around the green game was solid, and it was at a course that he had played well at in the past. Another course this week coming into the 3M that he's also played well at, so we'll definitely give him a look again this week and talk about him a little bit more when we get to the players. But then lineup A, obviously big miss. Cantlay fell down the leaderboards on Sunday. Matsuyama miscut, Berger miscut, Casey miscut. Hadwin played okay, but ended up doing nothing on the weekend. And Christian Bezen, who honestly was probably the best player in that lineup. Rory McIlroy, like I said, fell down. Rahm won. This is now 6 of 7 weeks that we've had a DraftKings play win the tournament, which helps. I finished in 8th out of 700 in a PGA Slice event on DraftKings, so that was a pretty nice finish for me. One of my higher ones. Finau obviously played great as well to go along with my 2 budget plays. So that really helped, and then I had pretty good inter-round plays. Remember, follow me on Twitter at SRP Picks in order to get those plays during the week. As we do every week, we'll get into the course data that we're going to see this upcoming week at the 3M Open. Now, we don't have a lot of data on this course. A lot of the information, actually all of the information we have, come from the one time we've played the event, which was last season. But from what we see and from what we look at the course, this is going to be a longer yardage course, but one that plays smaller. So it's a course where the 3 par 5s are all over 590, which makes it seem like a course where you would want to target guys who can hit it long off the tee. And that is going to be the play I'm going to do this week. However, we have seen guys who have been able to be accurate, hit it into the middle, and play their long irons in, also have a lot of success here. So those are the 2 type of player profiles that I'm targeting this week, and I'll show you where that analysis came from in the stats. I am targeting shots gained off the tee and driving distance this week. Driving accuracy has been something, at least from the last year of data that we saw, has been very easy to do at the 3M Open. 65.9% of drives hit the fairway, and good drive percentage, which is dictated based on some sort of driving distance, but also really factors in driving accuracy. 85.6% of drives are good drives. So this is not a course that's particularly difficult to hit the fairways, but it's one that you want to line yourself up in a good position and be far off the tee in order to play shorter irons in, because a lot of these par 4s are going to play over 450, unlike last week where you had more of a trickier, find the right side of the fairway, maybe more driving accuracy dictated rather than a bomb and gouge place like this one's going to have to be. Obviously, look at the guys at the top of the leaderboard last year. Matthew Wolff, Bryson DeChambeau, Colin Morikawa. All guys who hit really good drivers and really for a lot of distance as well. Two of the target areas that I'm looking at this week when it comes to approaches, 200 plus. 16.8% of the approaches at this tournament come from 200 yards and higher. This is not the second highest range in the thing. It's actually back to the 150 to 175. But compared to the rest of the tournaments, this is much more prominent at this tournament than it is at the others on PGA Tour. So I'm targeting guys who are going to be able to approach not only the par 5s in 2, which is going to be something that's really important this week, take advantage of those and get a lot of eagles, which has been a winning success, or at least a top 10 success that we saw last year, but also being able to reach some of these longer par 4s and put themselves in good spots for birdie tries even on these harder holes. The other key area, and this is the one I focused in on a little bit more, was 175 to 200 yards, which occurs with 22.5% of the approaches at this course, which is 8th highest on tour. This was the highest ranking area compared to the other courses on tour for any of the approaches. The highest amount of approaches come from this range, which is definitely a step up than we see at other tournaments on the tour, where most of the approaches come from 150 to 175 yards. So it's a little bit of a step up, maybe an iron up, 2 irons up, but that can be really important for a guy who may have confidence more in those lower irons, especially coming off a week where at the Memorial, 150 to 175 was by far and away the key area. So Memorial also shows here at 175 to 200 as well. Obviously, guys coming off the workday showed a little bit longer off the tee, so we could see some deviation into the 150 to 175. But I'm going to stick with these longer iron hitters to reach these par 4s and put themselves in good spots. So that's going to be one of my main focuses this week, shots gained approach, and in particular those longer iron hitters. The other areas this week don't really come into much play. Obviously, scrambling was really important at the Memorial, but here, as you see, the 3M Open, not super difficult to scramble at. The 1 to 3 putt, these greens are going to be fairly easy. Nothing else really popped off the page. A lot of these other approach categories were fairly low compared to the others relatively. So I put a huge amount of weight on ball strikers this week, guys who are going to get to the green and have a hot putting week. Obviously, I want guys who are going to be able to drop a lot of birdies if the winning score is going to be over -20 again, and guys who are going to be able to set themselves up in good positions to shoot -5, -6 on a given day, compared to last week where I was looking for more grinders who are going to be able to keep themselves around even -1, -2. Now let's get into the field of players that we're going to be seeing this week, and as always, we'll start with the guys above 10K. Smaller list this week. Only 5 guys slotting in these slots, and that's Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, Tony Finau, Tommy Fleetwood, and Paul Casey. This is going to be a quick one for me. I'm fading the 2 guys at the top, both for different reasons. Dustin Johnson has looked a little bit better than Brooks since coming back from the break. And by a little bit better, I mean he's won an event, obviously at the Travelers Championship. But if you look at the stats in his tournaments other than that time, it's not very good. He's lost in approach in 3 of the 5 tournaments he's had since coming back from the COVID break. And really at that Memorial event, or not at Memorial, at the Travelers event that he won was the only time he gained with his putter. So this is a guy who blew up last week at the Memorial, shot I believe +16 in 2 rounds or something like that. I don't know where his mind's at. That could have been, listen, I had a horrible round one. Let me just come out and, kick the ball around round two, get out of here. I don't want a WD from such a prestigious event. That might look bad. So let me just come around, play my round two, and then head to next week at the 3M. I think it's an encouraging sign for Dustin fans that he's coming out and playing again this week. If he was completely discouraged with his game, obviously would probably take this week off, given the weakness of this field. But I don't think his game's at the proper place, especially at 11,500, which I just think for a guy who shot plus 16 last week, that's preposterous. Lines up for what you want at this event. A good driving distance has been, like I said, with the approach has been okay since coming back from break. A lot better than a lot of people give him credit for. But I'm just going to stay away. I just don't like where his game's at. I don't think it's at the high enough level to be at 11,500 or the favorite coming into this event at 12-1. Brooks Koepka's injury talk has completely scared me away from him. His numbers since coming back from break have been horrible. His approach numbers in particular, really, really bad. Has lost strokes with his irons in, I believe, his last 3 events. Gained a little bit at Memorial during the first couple rounds when he was playing okay. Then completely faded away on the weekend. His putter's been hot or cold. Again, another guy who I really think statistically, as we see here, can drive the ball for distance, gets a lot of shots gained off the tee. When he's playing his best, his irons are on fire. But that knee problem, he talked about how it's still a concern for him. I'm going to stay away from Brooks Koepka this week. Again, 11,200, way too much for me to pay for a guy who's not even gaining with his irons at a course where you really need to do that in order to win. I'm going to stay away from Koepka this week. Not going to have him in any of my lineups. The first guy I'm probably going to play this week is Tony Finau, dropping down to 10,900. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a huge price for a guy who really doesn't have much win equity at any event that he plays at. Only one win, not major win. He doesn't have a major win. Only one win overall in his PGA career, and that was at the Puerto Rico Open. The dude looked great last week. Irons were back. Off the tee was never really left. It was there again. Around the green was good, and he was able to putt. That's what you're going to need to do here, besides the around the green stuff, which really isn't that important. But if you look here, the irons are always going to be a little bit less than the others around this range. But his top 75th percentile is still top 10 in this field. He's a guy who's going to hit every single fairway. He can hit it a long way. And he can set up for irons where from 175 to 200, he's one of the best in the field. And from 200 plus, when he played this event last year and finished tied for 23rd, he was really good from that range as well. So he has an affinity for the course. I think he's a much better player than both Koepka and Johnson. He's shown a lot more recent form if you're going to discount Johnson's victory and just look at the other events that he's played since break. So I'm willing to drop down the 600 and 300 DK dollars and play Tony Finau at the top of a lot of my lineups. There are a couple dead ranges that I have at the lower ranges that might prohibit me from playing a lot of Finau, as I might need to target a much more balanced upper 8,000 to lower 9,000 range. But I'm still going to be able to deviate to him in a lot of my lineups. Tommy Fleetwood, I don't know where his game's at. Probably not going to play a lot of them. I'd rather play him than both Brooks and Dustin because I know where their game's at and I don't like it. But Tommy, he's one of the only guys up here that doesn't finish in the top 75 this season in driving distance. That's not good. Haven't seen him since the break. He'll be back this week. Why he returns this week and not at a place like Memorial where he could have definitely gotten an invite if he showed he wanted to play, I don't know. I really don't. Can he win an event like this? Sure. I mean, he's one of the more talented players on the PGA Tour when he plays. I don't really understand why he's coming across now. There's just way too many questions for me about him. I'm going to fade him. I'm going to stick above 10,000 with Finau and my boy Paul Casey. I'm going to get back on him this week. I know he really burned us last week, but if you look at what he lost at, it's around the green and putting, which is just going to happen sometimes with him. As you see here, the red across the board and around the green and putting, but the ball striking numbers are intriguing. Gained over 2 strokes in both off the tee and approach last week at Memorial, a place that was really tough to do that. And he just continues to do that throughout his career. Great ball striker. Comes off really well at that 200-plus yard range. He's going to be able to score on par 5s. A lot of the water he can stay away from this week, and hopefully he doesn't get stuck around the green. Listen, if any one of your guys are scrambling this week, they're likely not putting up high enough scores to compete anyways. So I think if Paul Casey can get really hot, again, not a lot of win equity with either him or Finau, and above 10,000, that's kind of tough to swallow, but he's going to be a guy who can easily put in a top 20 finish for you this week. It's almost a lock for me, coming off a week where he played really good with his clubs. It's just the difficult conditions around Memorial kind of came back and haunted him around the greens. But I'm back on Paul Casey at an easier field this week. So Finau and Casey above 10,000 for me. Really, the other 3 are hard passes, unless you really want to bank on a Fleetwood great debut. So now we'll drop down to the high 9s all the way down to the mid 8s. So we'll go from Bubba Watson down to Sam Burns. And you might hear that and be like, what is this drop off? And I agree. A lot of the guys in the lower 8K that we'll touch on a little bit later to the higher 6K, I don't see much of a difference in long-term form of any of these players. And even a guy like Sam Burns, he's been red hot as of late, but if he returns to his normal PGA averages, it's not going to be pretty, especially rostering a guy for 8.5, which is one of the reasons I suggest that maybe you either target really hot guys or you go with a balanced lineup this week where you target a lot of big names at the top and then grab some of the sleepers that I suggest to you down below. But we'll start with Bubba Watson. I'm a fade this week. I mean, my God, the off the tee and approach numbers are great, much like Paul Casey in this way. However, his around the green and putting is also really, really bad, and the approach game is not nowhere near where Paul Casey's is. So while he's going to be able to stripe the ball down every single fairway really, really far, because that's just what Bubba does, are his irons going to be enough this week? I rostered him, I remember, 2 weeks ago at the Workday. Or did we roster him? No, we rostered him at Rocket Mortgage at a very similar type event. And his wedge, I mean, again, off the tee, great. Was striping everything 320 down the middle of the fairway. But the irons just weren't there, which is a concern for me. And if he's going to set himself up in scoring opportunities, that's got to be there. His putter's also run kind of cold recently, which is normally a Bubba quality that helps him put up low numbers. So I'm going to stay away from Bubba. I'd rather trade up to 200 to Paul Casey. Matthew Wolff, I'm not going for a guy. He's going to have so many just event requirements being the defending champ here. I know there's no fans, but you got to, answer a lot of interview questions, a lot of pressure on you, a lot of eyes on you. I'm staying away from him. I think a lot of people are going to go to him this week just because, like I said, Rocket Mortgage, a very similar up top leaderboard we saw there to what we saw at this event last year. So I think people are going to be back on Wolff. 9,700, I'll pass. He's a very volatile player. He could either be really high on the leaderboard or really, really low. So I'm not going to take a chance there. This brings me to now 3 ball strikers right in a row, and then a guy who ball struck really well for 1 week, and then 3 more ball strikers. So a lot of guys up here who can get hot, and I don't really see much of a difference between them, but I'm going to try to differentiate for you guys. Glover. Has been great since coming back from the break in ball striking, both off the tee and through approach. In particular, his off the tee game, which normally had taken a second billing to his approach game, has kind of surpassed it over the last couple weeks. Again, not a guy that's going to get in a lot around the green or putting, but he's definitely a step above some of these other ball strikers that are also been on really hot streaks, just because he's been able to do it for a longer period of time. Has gained at least 2 strokes in approach in each of his last couple tournaments, and I'm going to sprinkle in him to a lot of my lineups as well. I don't know if I would want to start a lineup with him because, again, not a lot of win equity in a guy like this, especially since his putter doesn't normally get super hot, but is a definite guy to make the cut in easy play in cash games. Russell Henley would be a non-cash game play for me. Unlike Glover, his putter can get really hot, and much like Glover, his approach game since coming back has been on fire. Now, his off the tee is not as good as Lucas, which is why he's $200 DraftKings dollars lower, but he's also better from the 175 to 200 yard range, which is my key area this week. I think Henley can go off. Honestly, I'd rather roster Glover than Henley just because I think he's a safer play, a guy we've seen finish out the top of the leaderboard more often than Henley. And Henley at 9,200, stomaching that after seeing him priced at around 7,300 a couple weeks ago is tough. It's tough. And we're going to have that conversation about a lot of these guys just because it's a weaker field. But I'd rather go Glover over Henley. But again, Henley I can't strike you as a bad play as his irons have been on fire as well. Harris English, though, is my favorite play from the 9,000 range. Played him last week, played great at Memorial, but his actual game lines up better for a scoring fest like this one will be. As we see, top 10 in both off the tee, 50th and 75th percentile, and approach 50th and 75th percentile. Definitely much more of a volatile play than a guy like Glover, but a guy who I feel like can really score low at this event. A possible 2-win candidate. I think his number's around 40 to 1 right now. Not great. If it drops to around 50, I'd be even a little bit more intrigued. But he's a guy who has been playing really, really well since coming back from break. Was playing really, really well just in the 2020 season in general. Ever since he really had that great performance at, I believe, oh my God, it was the tournament Brandt Snedeker won 2 years ago. Ooh, CT Pan was in that race as well. I don't remember the name of it. Obviously, leave it in the comments below if you guys find it out. But ever since that tournament where he missed the PGA playoffs by, I think, a single stroke, he's been on fire with the ball striking, and his putter can also get super hot. I'm going to have a lot of Harris English this week. I would love him to go with like a Finau English opener. No win equity there whatsoever, but I like it. Van Rooyen, hot last week, going to stay away this week. Euro player. I was on Bezenhout last week, so it's not just me not liking the Euro players. But his irons aren't as good as what they showed last week at Memorial, where he gained 8 strokes. On the Euro Tour, you see him around 59th. I'm going to stay away from Van Rooyen. If he can't get the irons hot like they were last week, he's not going to have a great week, and I don't think he's going to be able to. I'd much rather play this guy anyways, Doc Redman. On fire with the irons and off the tee. Doesn't hit it as far off the tee as I originally anticipated, which was kind of odd to me looking into it, but his putter has gotten hot at times. Didn't really play well at Memorial, but for me, that's a no-brainer. I mean, that wasn't a course he was going to play well at anyways. Didn't play well at the workday. Again, a place that requires a lot more around the green play than what we had seen in previous weeks. So Redmond, not exactly a high-end play for me at either of those events. Back at the 3M this week, this is a place he's going to perform. I'm going to have a bunch of Doc Redman in my lineup. If I can start Finau, English, Redman, I'd be happy. Henrik Norlander, where does the ownership go? That's the question. Norlander's done it more recently. Top 5 at the event at the Memorial, a place that I thought there was no way he'd play well at. He played well at. So it's kind of interested me over a guy like Redmond, whose their games are very similar long term, where they're both great off the tee and approach players and hadn't really shown much else. But Norlander, since coming back from the break, has all of a sudden become a really good scrambler as well, which is really interesting to me. Obviously, long term form still likes Redmond, but a guy like Norlander might take a lot of the ownership. I'm kind of hoping a lot more people go to Norlander and try to be sneaky in that way. I'm probably going to still take Redmond straight up and hope the missed cut gets people away from him, but Norlander's been playing really good golf as well. These lower score events are what I thought Norlander would be popping up at more. That Memorial Tournament finish really surprised me. So I still got to look into Norlander more. Obviously still a much younger player than Doc, 2 years younger, so he hasn't been on the tour as long, but I'm still going to play Doc over him. Sam Burns, complete fade for me. I'd rather go Norlander or Redmond a million times over compared to Burns. Burns, great off the tee, better than both of these guys at off the tee, but really doesn't hit as good of approaches. So I'm willing to go with Redmond and Norlander over him. In this range, my rankings would probably be English, Redmond, Norlander, with a slight look at a guy like Lucas Glover and fades on guys like Wolf, Watson, and Van Rooyen. We'll drop down below 8.5 now to the 8.4 to 7K range. So we're going from Luke List all the way down to Zinzhu Zhang. Again, some of these names got big upgrades over last week. If they were in the field at the Memorial, these guys were probably around 6.7, 6.8 priced and got huge jumps. We'll start with Luke List. Another ball striker. They really piled this higher 8K to lower 9K range with guys who have been red hot off the tee and with irons, and guys who probably should play well here. The thing is with Luke List is his putter is bad, really bad. So I don't like him as much as a guy like Sam Burns, Henrik Norlander, Doc Redman, who can get really hot with their putter. Luke List normally does not. I don't know how many scoring opportunities he's going to have. Again, probably better off the tee than all of those guys combined. His irons normally are a little lower than the way he's playing right now. This is a little bit of a step down for me compared to a guy like Norlander and Redman. Again, I'd rather trade up to those guys than List. Todd doesn't really fit the course for me. Same with Rogers. Same with Moore, really. Max Hama's the next interesting guy for me. Again, the irons have been much higher than normal form for him, but as a guy who can drive it off the tee, actually doesn't fit in the top 75 in driving distance, which surprised me because he can hit bombs off the tee. So at 8,000, I think he's interesting, but kind of deviating plays here at 8K because I also like Brian Harman, who's at the same price. Harman doesn't hit it far off the tee. You guys know that. He can definitely play these par 5s in 3. He's actually one of the better par 5 scorers on tour, which is interesting. Obviously, top 50 in the field in both off the tee, all percentiles, and approach 50th and 75th percentiles, gains a bunch of strokes around the green, probably won't be the thing helping him this week, but he can also get hot with the irons. Since the break, has been top 20 in the field with his irons and shots gained, and is also very good at approaches from over 200 yards. So if you're going with a smaller hitter this week, it's going to have to be a guy like Harman. Finished really high at this event last season, I believe a top 20, so I'm willing to get back on board with him this week when a lot of guys around him are probably worse players long-term who are on hotter form. So I'm going to have a couple looks at Harman this week. Next guy I'm going to drop down to and talk about because I really don't like a ton of people in this range. Complete fades for me on Jonathan Vegas and Siwoo Kim, who had massively hot irons last week. Siwoo, I'm going to stay away from him. I like him at smaller courses. Vegas doesn't have the iron play to play well here. Sepp Straka has the kind of profile to play well here. Don't like his recent form, or at least the way he's getting his recent results, which is mostly putting. But I'm going to Will Gordon. Again, Chris Kirk, again, same thing, around the green and putting. But again, going down to Will Gordon, a guy who has such deviating form. His irons really are hit or miss. If they're on, they're top 50 in the field and 75th percentile. He can finish in the top 30, top 20 at an event because his off-the-tee game is so good. Very good off the tee, very good around the green, can get hot with the putter as we saw at the Travelers a few weeks back. Since the break, has been really good in both off the tee game and 175 to 200 yards, which is the key approach range. Also, longer term form, he's great from over 200 yards as a guy who's going to be able to knock down these par fives. Strikes me as a little bit of a low man budget Matthew Wolff that you're getting for 7,700. I know we haven't seen that much form for Gordon, but this is and not that much form from Wolff, therefore, so maybe a wrong comparison to make, but a guy who's really good off the tee consistently, hit or miss with the irons, that really strikes me as a Matthew Wolff type player. Who won at this event last year? Matthew Wolff. Who am I fading this week? Matthew Wolff. But this kind of skill set I really think can do well in this field. Matthew Wolff's more of a fade due to the price and the ownership that he's likely to garner. Will Gordon, was off the last couple weeks. Hasn't really lost any form, can hit the ball a ton off the tee. I'm going to have a lot of Will Gordon this week, especially when guys around him like Rafa Cabrera and Chris Kirk just don't really fit this personnel. Carlos Ortiz, give a look at. I'm going to probably stay away just because his ball striking isn't as elite as some of the guys I'm playing around him, but has good course history, much like last week, and I stayed with the course history, and it ended up, winning me some DK bucks. So, Carlos, give him a look, 7,700. I'd rather play Gordon at the price. Scott Stallings, I really like this week. Another guy who, off the tee, this time is a little bit of a question. Doesn't hit it super far off the tee either. The approach game can get really, really hot, and his putter can as well. Something about Scott Stallings I really like this week. Also has good course history. Doesn't really show here, but the putter really got hot last year at this course. If he can regain some of that form and really tune in those irons that have been great since the break, I'm all about Scott Stallings this week. Looking further down the board, going to fade a couple of these guys. Troy Merritt, his irons were super hot at, I believe, the workday. That's not normal for him. Ryan Armour, same thing, had a little bit of a hot form, but has actually lost strokes with his irons in 4 out of the last 5 rounds. Noren has done the same. Howell, no. Richie Werenski is interesting, can get hot with the putter, but my next guy I'm going down to is Sam Ryder. We've seen a lot of great irons from Sam Ryder since returning from break. Top 20 in the field in that category. Is also really good from over 200 yards with those longer irons. Obviously, top 20 in the field also in 2020 shots gained approach 50th percentile, which I think is going to be really important this week. I'm going to target him. I think he's a safe play here at 7,300 at an event that can get really low. His putter can actually get quite hot at times, so I'm going to go with Ryder. Possible first-round leader play for me, but is definitely a guy in DraftKings that I feel can definitely make the cut, and at this lower range where you're going to need to roster guys if you want to play guys at the top that you know the name of, you're going to have to play some of these guys, so I think Ryder's a definite possibility there. Dropping down a little farther, avoid Jason Kokrak this week. I know he's a big name value, and at 7,200 seems very much mispriced compared to the guys around him. I'm staying away from him. You should as well. His form since being back is horrible. His irons have been really, really bad, and the rest of his game doesn't really strike out well. And even if he was playing well, his putters sometimes at courses like these run really cold, which doesn't allow him to score as many birdies as he needs to. So stay away from him. I'm getting on the Cameron Tringale train, which has been a really wild one over the last couple weeks, but at 7,200, I think he's mispriced. His irons can get really, really hot, as we saw a couple weeks ago when he tied for 30th at the Travelers. Besides that, it's just been up and down game with him. Can his off the tee game be good enough? Yes. His driving distance is top 75 on the PGA Tour, which is why he has the X by his name. I'm going with Cameron Tringali this week at 7,200. Other guys I'm going to play from down here, Tom Hoge at 7,100. His irons, again, can get really hot and he can putt. I like him at these type of events, and his irons have come back after a little bit of a cold stretch and since coming back from break. Emiliano Grillo I'm going to play. Again, irons hot. The putter was horrible at this event. In the past, actually no, not at this event in the past, at events since coming back from break, but I'm going to get back on the Emiliano Grillo train. He can ball strike, 7,100. I'd probably rather play Hoge just because his putter can get hot, but Grillo definitely a safe play to at least ball strike really well, and hopefully he'll make a cut, a guy who can finish a little bit more on higher end if he can return to longer term form. And the final guy I'm going to play from this range at 7,000 is going to be Adam Long. I think Chase Seifert and Xinju Zhang, and really look at all the guys at 7,000 right now. Scott Piercy for longer-term players, Chase Seifert, much more recent, Michael Thompson, obviously at RBC Heritage, people saw him pop off. Xinju Zhang last week had a great tournament, but I think the guy who's going to be left out of all these guys is Adam Long. The 75th percentile approach is top 10 in the field, obviously something that's going to be really important this week. His putting's really good. Also, it can get hot at times. Another top first-round leader play for me, and at 7,000, if I'm going to dip all the way down here, he's the guy I'm going to want to target. So from this 8,400 to 7,000 range, obviously, guys, I gave you names top to bottom. Guys who I'm targeting at the top, more Luke List, Brian Harmon, Will Gordon. Guys I'm targeting down below, Sam Ryder, Cameron Tringali, Emiliano Grillo, Adam Long. Guys who I'm fading include guys who just really haven't been able to ball strike. The off-the-tee game's not there right now. Alex Noren, Rafa Cabrera-Bello, Siwoo Kim, and Jason Kokrak. So last but not least, we'll move down to the 6K range. And despite the fact I only gave you a couple plays from that 7K range, I like a lot more of the guys down here. Like I said previously, not much of a difference for me for guys like Matthew Naismith, Bryce Garnett, Chesson Hadley, than guys in the higher part of the range like, I don't know, Charlie Hoffman. Like, why are these guys priced $600 DK more? I have no idea. So I'm going to have a couple of these names, particularly 6,900 popped off for me for some reason. I don't know why. If we look down here, Matthew Naismith obviously pops off the page. Didn't play well at the Memorial or the Workday. Again, not a surprise for me for a guy who doesn't gain any strokes around the green. He's going to hit a lot of irons in very, very well. He's going to hit a lot of putters. Played well at the RBC Heritage, his hometown course, but his irons have just stayed hot regardless of the location. It's been the off-the-tee game and more of the around the green game that's been his concern. At this event, it's either going to be hot or not. If you're looking for a guy in tournament play, you can take some Matthew Naismith this week. 6,900, I think he's a step above some of the other guys' names around him. Bryce Garnett, another guy who I really like here. Played really well at this course last year. Was top 20 in the field in both off the tee and approach at that event of the players who were in the field this year. Also really pops off from that 175 to 200 yard games this range this season. Can get really hot with the putter. Is really good off the tee. Can his irons get funneled in? Since the break they have. And if he can continue that form, he's going to be an interesting play. Chesson Hadley, 6,900. Again, really great with his irons, longer-term form. And Jason Duffner has just been great. Was also really good last week at the Memorial Tournament. His irons have been really, really good. And if you see here, 3 guys in this 6,900 price area that have top 20 in the approach 75th category. So that means you're getting guys who have great top-end approachability at a really low price. And that's something I'd like to target this week. Now, the thing is with Duffner, great tee to green player, can't really putt, which is kind of a concern at an event where you're going to need to score low, and really is not surprising that he popped off more at a tournament last week like the Memorial, where it was more of a grind and you needed to, get a lot of pars in there. So obviously tournament play, I'd be targeting more of a Hadley or a Naismith, but I think Jason Duffner to make the cut this week is a pretty good look as well. After the 6,900, it does drop off a little bit. Other guys I'm targeting from this area, Hudson Swafford. You see a lot of red in him, and that's a problem, but hits bombs off the tee. Has okay course history here, is also really good from over 200 yards when it comes to his approaches. He can get really hot with the irons and the putter, and is around the green game solid. Again, around the green game here, probably not that prominent. It all comes down to his off the tee. He's long. Can he keep it straight? That's the big question. But if you're banking on a guy down here, it's probably not going to be a safe play. It's going to be more of a swing. Hudson Swafford's a guy who can finish in the top 30 for you, but he could also miss the cut. So Swafford, a risky play, but one that can get really hot. And especially at an event like this, you're going to want a guy that can go low. Looking past some of the bigger names like Charles Schwartzel, who's been playing pretty poorly, Russell Knox, same thing, I find Bronson Burgoon. Burgoon doesn't really pop off in any areas. Top 50 is obviously his highest qualification in the 50th percentile for approach. But if you look a little deeper, played really well at this course last year. It's pretty good long irons into greens, and I just think he's going to be a good play this week. If his putter gets hot again, anyone can really perform at this event if they have a hot putter, so I'm looking at him. Stuart Sink's another guy I'm kind of passing on. His longer-term form might attract a lot of ownership down in this range, but his irons mostly come from shorter wedges, which isn't going to be as prominent at this event, so I'm going to stay away. Other guys I'm going to, Johnson Wagner's irons have been red hot. I'm going to be jumping on him this week. Has great course form, both off the tee and approaches, specifically from the 175 to 200 yard range and the 200 plus yard range, so I'm all for that. At 6,600, that's some pretty good value. He's been missing and making cuts kind of periodically, so he's not going to garner a lot of ownership. For a low-owned guy, kind of like him better than Hudson Swafford, to be honest. I think he's got a little bit of a higher floor. Again, the off-the-tee game's a little bit scary, but I'm going to be on Wagner this week. I'm normally not a Johnson Wagner guy, so it'll be interesting for me, but I'm going to give him a try. Seamus Power, same thing. Not normally this kind of guy, especially a guy who's sub 100 in this field and 75th percentile approach, but is a guy who, again, good course history, can hit the ball really, really far off the tee, and can approach these long par 4s and par 5s in 2. So Power, a guy I'm looking at. Probably not going to play him as much as a guy like Johnson Wagner, but 6,500 is even lower in price. Cameron Percy, I'd probably rather play above him at the same price. Can get really hot with the irons. The putter has been but I'd rather play him in an event like this. So probably down in this range, I'd go with Percy. Dropping down even farther, I'm staying away from guys like Watney and Putnam, and I'll drop down to, where's my final guy here? Oh, Alex Chechka. So we see Chechka pop up at a couple events during the season. If you look here, his approach 25th percentile is top 10. Really interesting to me. Yeah, he hits irons really, really well. Off the tee, he's not great, but again, like a lot of these other guys in this range, the off the tee is not great, but the approach game is really, really good. On the season is top 20 in the field in both 175 to 200 yards and 200 plus yards. Now, I don't believe we've seen him since the break, which is a concern, so make sure to check his form coming back in, but I definitely think he's a really great tournament play this week. He's going to garner almost no ownership and is a guy who could really pop off. Definite first-round leader look for me because he's been in that kind of position before where he can drop a -6, -7 at an event, especially if his irons really start to get to highest form. Can he get the putter underway? Can he get the off the tee underway? I don't know, but if you're going to load up and be super top heavy in this tournament, like I might on some of my lineups, you're going to have to reach down here, and Alex Chechka would be one of those guys. My only other guy from really deep is Hank Lebioda. Lebioda, like I said, really good from those key ranges, 175 to 200 yards and 200 plus yards. Played well at this event last year in those two areas, but lost a ton of strokes putting and ended up missing the cut. If he's able to get the putter a little bit underway, which has been a concern since the break has returned, his off-the-tee game's pretty solid, and he's able to hit a lot of greens in regulation, especially from those longer ranges. So if we're looking at below 7,000, not a ton of names down here when you get to the lower parts, but at the top, really love Naismith, Garnett, Hadley, and Duffner, all at 6,900. Dropping a little bit lower if you want to go with a guy like Burgoon, Wagner, or Percy, and then dropping into the really low range. These are guys that you would not take unless you really pounded top-end guys. Go with either Chechka or with Lebioda. So we'll end here on my targeted player page. I've already really cut down the field this week to the type of guys I'm going to play. Guys who I'm looking at to win. Obviously, if you remember 2 weeks ago, I put John Rahm on the Workday Charity Open to-win sheet. Obviously didn't win there. Had him in DraftKings lineups last week, which really panned out for me. So, guy I'm thinking is going to win this week. Ooh, it's going to be a tough one. Going to be someone at the top, I think. If you want to reach farther down the board, I'd go for a guy like Harris English, who can get insanely hot with his iron and putting play. But from the top, if I'm going to have to select someone, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go with Tony Finau. He's going to have to break through eventually in his career. I think that his form last week really left me pretty impressed. I think that if his irons are back, he's definitely live at this event, and his putter can get really hot here. This is a course he's played at before, which he has that advantage over a lot of the other guys in this top range. So I'm going with Tony Finau this week to win this event. But again, if you want lower guys, Harris English, Doc Redman, I don't know what his price is even going to be this week given what he did last week. I don't know how betting markets are going to treat him. And if you want to drop down to even lower, maybe a guy like Will Gordon, obviously first-round leader plays like an Alex Chechka or a Sam Ryder are both pretty good plays as well from that range. Thank you so much for listening in today, and please continue to tune back into the SRP Picks YouTube channel. We'll be doing a couple different sports over the next couple weeks. I'm hoping to get maybe an MLB in show next week, kind of talking about the first weekend of events that they're going to have. They're going to have, for the first time, games this weekend, so that will be fun. So please like and subscribe to this show and the channel in general. Please also check out my Twitter, which is linked down below in the description. And also check out my website where I use all of the tools that I did on today's site, so that you can also do them in your preparation and studying for the upcoming week at the 3M Open. Thank you so much for listening in today, and hope you have a great week of DraftKings picks and betting selections.